Greetings. My name is Dr. Samuel Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of In Touch Community Services Incorporated. I come to you today to say thank you for coming and being involved in our trainings for as the United States Department of Agriculture. We have a collaborative effort to work together to show you how we can raise organic vegetables and do things the organic way. It kind of brings us back to the old farm, but doing it in a modern way. And we have the knowledge and the expertise to show us how to do those things in order to produce those plants, raise those animals and things of this nature, to make sure that we receive the training and the education that we need. And that's why we're here today. We're here to teach you more about the United States Department of Agriculture and the services that they bring. So we pray that you will enjoy it, continue to come and listen to us as we teach you concerning the United States Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
We're here today with In Touch Community Service, USDA Outreach and Technical Assistance Program. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Kenny Davis for allowing In Touch to come and allow us to look at his land. And we're going to this afternoon, we're going to be talking about crop rotation, cover crops. But first, we're going to talk about our cover crop here. With me, I have Mr. Walter Jackson. Walter is a longtime friend of mine, and he's just going to give us some constructive criticism and some insight on cover crops. So at this time, I turn it over to Mr. Walter Jackson and let him talk about the cover crop here. Again, thank Mr. Kenny Davis for letting us be able to use his property to do our workshop this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Otis. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about one of my favorite things, and that's cover crops. Of course, cover crops is nothing new. Many years ago, farmers would plant cover crops. They would plant hairy vetch, clover, turn them under with a moldboard plow, and turn it back into the soil. This was a practice that many cotton farmers used years and years and years ago. But we got away from cover crops, and we lost something when we did that. The thing about cover crops is that it fits three, possibly four, of the national principles for soil health. One of them would be to keep the soil covered, keep the soil armored, protected at all times. Another would be to keep a living root in the soil. One of the others would be to add plant diversity for the microorganisms that live in the soil. And then the possible one that I mentioned is when we integrate livestock on cover crops, then we can actually get more benefit from the cover crop by recycling the crop through the animal and getting the manure spread back on the soil. So we're covering 2 or 3 different resource concerns with that. Now what I like to do is just break down the series of principles that we talked about. The first one is keeping the soil covered. Keeping the soil covered cuts down on erosion. Now, how can we do this and do it in a better way is to maybe start to, as we harvest the crop, we can fly on a crop of cover of seed, or broadcast a crop of seed over the crop before and as we harvest it. When we bush hog or shred the stalks or the residue of these crops, we actually cover the seed with the leaves, and as they begin to decay, as fall approaches, and what we get is an emerging cover crop. In this particular example, we can see that this land has been tilled. And when we till soil, we lose some of the benefits from cover crop, but we also gain by planting this cover crop in this nature. So keeping the soil covered, one, it keeps the soil cool. The next thing it will do is that it will actually protect the soil from erosion. Now in the spring, when it's really wet in other places, with a cover crop on the ground, you can expect to get into this ground and begin to plant 2 to 3 days earlier, because the crop is going to be using excess moisture that might be in the soil. Now, let's talk about the living root. The soil, the nutrients in the soil transfer by using what we call mycorrhizal fungi. And that's fungi that live on the roots of each of these of all plants, basically. So what these plants do is they exude exudates, and these fungi live around the exudates. And as these fungi eat the exudate, they excrete, they draw nutrients in, and they actually help to transfer some plant nutrients in and out of this root system. By doing that, they create a atmosphere around that root that's very fertile, that's very good for plant growth. So when that happens, then we have a living root in the soil. Now, plant diversity. Organisms that live in the soil, that's the backbone of the whole thing. It's all being driven by the sun. Photosynthesis to this leaf. The leaf drives water down through the plant, exudates come out, the plant, fungi eat on to the exudates, and it all recycles in this system, basically. So in this system around this particular plant, you have this atmosphere of nutrient-rich soil. By that, the crop in the next season may be able to get some of those nutrients and use them. Now, this particular field has a combination of brassicas, which is a popular cover crop. This is daikon radish. A lot of people call it tealish radish. What that will do is actually open up the soil a good bit and draw some of the nutrients from the bottom, from the deep down in the profile up to the top of the land. And when it do that and die out in the winter or spring, when it dies out, it leaves those nutrients in the root zone so the next crop can get it. Okay. The next thing we have here is a grass type crop, which is either wheat, a triticale, or rye. Rye is our standard go-to crop, even though more wheat is being used in Mississippi than any other cover crop. But rye is getting to be more and more popular because rye is a diverse crop that we can use in a lot of different situations and gain a lot by using cover crops. We talk about the diversity, and in the diversity, what we mean is that it's kind of like us eating in a refrigerator, basically. If all you had in your refrigerator was bread, then you wouldn't like that very much. And many of us will go other places to find something else to eat. So the fungi will do the same thing. If we only had the exudates and the material that's being produced by this radish in the soil profile, then our population of mycorrhizal fungi would all be one type of population, and they wouldn't really survive a whole lot. But when we can mix it with a combination of things, then we get a balance in that way. So another thing that we have to be conscious of is what type of cover crop that follows a crop. Say, for example, if you have a corn crop, which is a grass type crop, then you want to follow it with a legume, with a clover or a brassica in behind the corn. But if we have soybeans or a leguminous crop, could be peas, field peas, any type of leguminous crop, then you want to come behind that crop with something like possibly a brassica if you're looking for some soil compaction problems down there, and then you want to come behind that crop with a grass type crop like the rye or wheat or triticale. So those are combinations that you use behind crops like that. Of course, cotton is a non-leguminous crop, so you want to use a crop that like a grass crop or brassica behind cotton. We shy away from using the clovers because some of the diseases that attack clover will also attack the cotton crop. So we have to be careful in that regard. Cover crops, like I say, is a good tool to use in a toolbox. The best thing to do when using cover crops is to go to a no-till system. Therefore, then now we're trapping the growth that we have gotten from the soil fertility. We're trapping that into the soil, and we're not exposing it, letting it burn away when we plow the soil. So cover crop and no-till is sort of a new paradigm shift that we're going to in order to improve soil health and also help with cover crops. Now, I might mention that cover crops are available to farmers through several programs through the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. One of the programs, the standby program, is the EQIP program. A farmer can go in and apply for cover crops in several different initiatives. You can do it in the row crops. If it's a special crop initiative like a garden or truck crops, then it can use in that way. You can apply for it when you have seasonal high tunnels and use it, the practice in that particular way. So there are other benefits through natural resources that you can apply for and achieve cover crops on your farms. The next thing that you want to be conscious of is that there are also some conservation security program payments associated with cover crops. Therefore, you want to be doing good things on your land and be rewarded for doing those things through the conservation security program. Now, you want to check with your local district conservations or your local office, NRCS office at all times, because all through the year there are special initiatives that work and build upon soil health. These particular initiatives can help you plant cover crops, achieve it on your place, and once you try it, I believe that you will continue to do it from year to year.
One additional question, I had a question about, you answered that question about the NRCS participation. Other question that I had, what are the disadvantage of using a legume as a cover crop?
Legumes are very good cover crops. The advantage is their addition of nitrogen. White clover can give you 250 pounds of nitrogen in the soil. Red clover can do close to the same. And when I say red clover, I mean the one with the purple bloom, the true red clover, not the crimson clover. Even though crimson clover makes a good cover crop, you don't get the nitrogen that you get from the other clovers. We do recommend the crimson clover though, because it comes up fast. It usually gets out of the way by the time we're getting ready to get our crop planted, so it works as well. So that's an advantage to it, the nitrogen advantage. You know, it decomposes fairly fast too, and when it makes its own nitrogen and dies, it leaves that nitrogen available for the next crop. The disadvantage is that they've been known to carry certain diseases, certain funguses that live in clover, particularly when you have a thick stand of clover. And these fungi spores can actually survive and pass into your crop if you're planting a legume crop right in behind the clover. So if you have clover down, then I would not plant peas or soybeans or any type of legume crop right behind the clover. It's always good to come back with a grass crop or a crop like a cotton or okra or something like that behind clover. They do really well. That's what the farmers in the old days, they would plant a legume crop like Harry Vetch, and then they would come behind it with a cotton crop, and they were successful back then.
Again, we thank Mr. Jackson for the pertinent information. We thank him for the information about how we can also obtain resources for planting cover crops through Natural Resource and Conservation Service. I'm Otis Davis with InTouch Community Service Incorporation, and I'm the education facilitator with the InTouch service. I'm here this afternoon. We're going to be talking about crop rotation. I have with me my good friend, Mr. Walter Jackson. He's going to talk about the benefits of crop rotation. And we can see here, he's going to talk about this field in and out. And I'm going to turn it over this time to Mr. Walter Jackson.
Thank you, Otis. It's my pleasure to talk a little bit about crop rotation. And crop rotation really, again, is one of the oldest practices that farmers have been doing for years. And to get certain benefits from transferring one crop in behind another. So let's make sure we understand what crop rotation really is. It's planting a different type of crop in behind another crop. Not a different variety of crop, but a different type of crop. For example, planting beans and then coming behind the beans with corn. Not planting two different types of beans right behind beans. So what are the advantages for doing that? One of the advantages is root diversity or crop diversity. Crop diversity helps to build soil organisms, a multiple species of soil organisms. Multiple species of soil organisms give us multiple factories for manufacturing and keeping nutrients in the soil profile, in the root profile. Another benefit of crop rotation is that we get a decrease in plant diseases and a decrease in insects. Certain diseases will attack certain types of crops. Then they don't attack other types of crops. So when we rotate, we break the life cycle of diseases and we break the life cycles of insects just as well. By breaking these life cycles, what we're doing actually is giving our crop a chance to really produce and be void of that. When we break the life cycle and we use Mother Nature and crop rotation practices to do that, then we cut down on our use of herbicides, our use of insecticides, therefore making our crops safer, healthier, and also protecting the waterways because we don't lose any nutrients off to or any chemicals that get off site. So these things help in crop rotation a good bit. Now, how can a farmer get help or more knowledge about rotating crops? The Natural Resource Conservation Service have programs that help farmers grow in the way of crop rotation. So a farmer could go by the local office, Natural Resource Conservation Service office, and apply for programs like EQIP, CSP, and a host of other initiatives that the Natural Resource Conservation Service offer, and get some information, some technical assistance, as well as possibly some financial assistance in rotating the crops. We see crop rotation work best in specialty crops. It works in field crops like corn and soybeans, and we also get a big bump in benefits from rotating crops in a high tunnel situation where we have an intense use of the soil, and these different crops help benefit one to the other. Another way that crop rotation can help is the use of nitrogen. A soybean crop, which is a leguminous crop, or any type of leguminous crop. In this particular instance, field peas were planted on this particular soil that we're standing on. And then behind the field peas, we're planting some turnips. So the field peas produce their own nitrogen, and when those peas died or was destroyed, the nitrogen was left in the soil. These turnips will benefit from the nitrogen that was left in the soil. So you get some carryover nitrogen from using a leguminous crop in rotation to a fibrous or a grass type crop in that regard. So crop rotation has its nature's benefit. And if you just look out into a place that has not been tilled or have not been farmed in a while, what you will see is a different variety of plants growing. You know, if we look out in this field, we see some sages growing, we see some grasses growing, there's some broadleaves, there's some forbs out there growing. All these things are what nature is doing to rotate itself or to keep some diversity in the soil profile. So when we get into monocultures like planting corn or beans or cotton or greens or field peas, then we need to mimic nature by rotating to different types of crop in order to keep the diversity of soil microorganisms going, therefore keeping our soil fertile, keeping our soil healthy, and sustaining agriculture.
Mr. Walter Jackson is going to give us a demonstration. He's going to talk about the ins and outs of mulching. And he's going to talk about the benefits of it and how it benefits a farmer and how a farmer can go about making a compost pile. At this time, I turn it over to Mr. Walter Jackson to do our discussion on mulching.
Well, thank you, Otis. As we said, today's subject is quite an interesting subject, mulching. Now, you might ask, what's all involved in mulching? Well, the first thing we want to get to when we talk about organic mulching is we want to talk about the process of composting, because what we use is material from the compost to make an organic mulch, basically. So first, let me get into the composting, and then we talk a little bit about the mulching. So what we have here is a compost pile. This particular producer basically is taking residue, in this case from his garden or from his crop, and what he's doing is using a carbon source. The carbon source is wood chips, it's these leaves, this is grass cuttings. These are carbon sources. So what he's doing is layering it. He take a layer of his produce, used old produce that he harvested from his crop that wasn't any good. Then he layers it with a carbon source, with, in this case, wood chips or these grass cuttings. And then he will add more material from his crop, from his, could be household stuff, could be, trash in your household, could be a number of different types of products that you use. And then what happens, it goes through a heat. It gets very hot inside of this pile, and when that heat reaches like 130, 140 degrees, it breaks down the products that are in this pile, and they all really turn back into an organic source, or turn back into a soil. And what we're after is a fine type of soil here that we can use in our crops. Now, in mulching itself, to talk about mulching is a process of adding a layer of either organic or inorganic material to the soil. And by doing this, we can eliminate weeds that might happen to be a problem for a particular farmer. Can also retain moisture in the soil by using mulch. There are even some insects like aphids that are distracted by a certain type of mulch and don't attack plants like tomatoes as much as in the natural scene, therefore eliminating almost the spotted wilt virus, which is such a bad problem in tomatoes. Now, when I say organic mulch, I'm talking about using natural things like straw, like wood chips, grass cuttings, hay can make a strong mulch. Now, inorganic mulches is where we see the black plastic being used, or the plastic mulch being used. There's all types of landscaping fabrics that you can use as mulches. And the advantages for this, like I said, is the moisture protection. Anytime in the southeast where we live, we can experience 2 or 3 months, particularly July and August. These are hot months where rainfall is seldom, and when that happens, a good mulch can conserve moisture, therefore keep our crop healthy and flourishing when other crops are depleted for moisture in the root zone by doing that. That's the gist of mulching.
One question, you was talking about the different types of plants and different types of things that you use in your mulching pile. The seed from plants, for instance, on this pile here, we see that there have to be some seed there because we see some watermelon growth there. What about using this pile? Or the soil is going to heat up enough to destroy the seed. Right. So when the farmer or the homeowner use it as mulch, will it just be planting seed back in the ground, or would the seed be decomposed into the mulch?
Right. Right. When this is done correctly, in fact, this is the top layer, and what it is uh, residue from his harvest, basically melons that were immature, or some melons that did not make the grade to be sold to the market. So he put them in here. Then what you would do is cover those with a uh, uh, carbon source, and when the heat hits that, it will destroy any living thing in there. When it gets to be 140 degrees, the seed can no longer be viable, and therefore you won't be planting seed into your crop because it will destroy those. It's common to see some sprouts coming off the top of it, but down in this profile, the seed that have already gone through the heat process are no longer viable in most cases. In fact, it's almost a sterile soil when it comes to seed and things like that.
When it decomposes and turns into organic matter, then it's ready available for the homeowner or the producer to use as a mulch.
To use.
Again, we thank Mr. Walter Jackson for giving us this discussion on mulch. Also want to thank Mr. Kenny Davis for allowing us to come to his farm and actually film this InTouch webinar, or this InTouch seminar for you. Thank you again.